Hey everyone, welcome to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. Apologies for lack of reviews at the start of this year. It's been a bit hectic. I've got a book on the way that I will no doubt be talking about in due course. I've been working on that and been a bit battered this week by COVID diagnosis. I finally caught COVID after 2 years, but I'm feeling largely fine. I'm just isolating at the moment. This is actually lined up pretty well with this review of the Batman, which I actually saw a week ago now, and I've kind of sat on the review of this until right up to the day of release. It's out in the UK as I record this on Friday, the 4th of March, and there's a lot to process. As with any comic book movie, particularly as with any Batman movie, there's a lot to take in, there's a lot to digest, and I've really had to think this one through a little bit, because I think in comparison to a lot of the reviews that I've been reading on Rotten Tomatoes, where the consensus is broadly positive, actually very positive. Lots of people are saying it's one of the best Batman movies, one of the best comic book movies ever made. I'm somewhat in the middle. I'm not of the opinion that it's a masterpiece. By no means is it a failure. I think it's commendably ambitious, if flawed. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm in a 3 out of 5 position, I think. Lots and lots to talk about, though. I'll try my absolute damnedest not to give away any spoilers. Suffice it to say that it's Robert Pattinson's debut as Batman. Really, really fascinating choice of actor. I feel like I've been banging the drum for Robert Pattinson for a very long time. He's left Twilight behind years and years ago, as if the recent likes of The Lighthouse and High Life didn't make that clear enough. Also, Good Time as well, the Safdie brothers film, in which he's absolutely brilliant. He brings a commendably stoic, granite-jawed, haunted twist to the portrayal of Bruce Wayne Batman in this. And as per the storyline and the direction from Matt Reeves, the narrative picks up with Bruce Wayne on his second year of being Batman. He's on the beat in Gotham City, which is full of venal corruption and sort of dank, mouldering secrets. And Bruce Wayne is at this moment growing into the more sophisticated iteration of the Batman that we know he will eventually become. But the one of the great things about this movie, one of the things this movie gets right, is it takes Batman back to those pragmatic principles of him becoming the world's greatest detective. And this movie really does put that to the forefront. We see at the beginning of the movie, and actually quite a sort of Sin City aping, quite stylized, hard-baked voiceover, we have Robert Pattinson's Batman explaining this context to us. So in a way, this movie almost feels like Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight without having had Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins beforehand. All of the preamble has taken place off screen, and we're dropped in at the beginning with Batman in his second year on the job, already aligned, albeit somewhat uneasily, with Jim Gordon, brilliantly played by Jeffrey Wright, I had to say. And effectively, I want to be as sketchy about the plot as possible. Suffice it to say that Batman and Gordon are on the trail of a serial killer named the Riddler. So there's a reinvention of the character whom many people know from Jim Carrey's portrayal in Batman Forever. The Riddler has here been reimagined as a live streaming Zodiac-esque killer, chillingly played by Paul Dano. He is seemingly out to expose corruption in Gotham City, and he's pulling Batman into the fray and leaving all these mysterious ciphers and clues, and Batman and Gordon have to effectively kind of get to the bottom of the mystery, all the while as Batman is learning to grow into his own legend. The police don't trust him. There's a really, really good sequence early on in which this is a scene in the trailer where Batman actually turns up at the first Riddler crime scene, and the police actively see him as a freak. The police don't see him as Batman. They see him as a dangerous vigilante in a mask. And I like that pragmatic attitude, like the idea that Batman hasn't become the icon that, with it, whereas we normally see him, which is really, really fascinating. And the narrative then has got many, many other different threads to it. You also have Zoe Kravitz as Selena Kyle, Catwoman, who in this is reimagined as a waitress in a underground Gotham City nightclub, and where she serves drinks to Gotham's most feared mobsters, primarily represented by Carmine Falcone, as played by John Turturro, and also the Penguin, played by a completely unrecognizable Colin Farrell. They've done a really, really good job burying Colin Farrell under these prosthetics, and that's an enjoyably kind of hammy, kind of, you know, performance of, like, you imagine like Robert De Niro having gone to seed or something. That's actually a really entertaining performance. And what happens is that the movie skirts around a lot of these narrative threads, I think, a bit too loosely for my liking, because I think at the center of the movie what you do have is a very frightening threat in the form of Paul Dano's Riddler, who is anarchistic and wants to propagate something. He wants to propagate his own form of chaos. If you think of like what Heath Ledger did as the Joker in The Dark Knight, this is very much picking up the mantle from that, but infusing it with contemporary overtones. And this is obviously what the film is trying to do as a whole. The aesthetic is very rich, very gothic, brilliantly shot by Greig Fraser, who shot Dune, and it was shot a lot in the UK, in Liverpool and Glasgow, and the architecture of the cities gives it more of that typically Tim Burton Batman-esque feel. There's a real organic physicality to the way that Gotham is envisaged, which I really liked. I really liked that. I thought that was really great. Surprisingly little action. There is a fantastic car chase sequence midway through the movie in which the new Batmobile, which is reimagined as a muscle car, comes out. But really, this is more a relentlessly gloomy, downbeat story about Batman on the beat in Gotham, attempting to track down this, you know, incredibly dangerous figure. But the investigation takes all these strange turns involving the Gotham City underworld and the mobsters. And I think, to be honest, I think it kind of gets lost in the woods a little bit. I think there can be too much of a good thing. It's too long. It's 160 odd minutes, so it's longer than The Dark Knight. I believe it's longer than The Dark Knight Rises, which was already massively overlong anyway. So, and I think there could have been more pruning on the script in terms of, right, can we just get to the heart of the threat a lot quicker? And I think that is a problem. So for all the movie's assured technique and visual design and a fantastic score from Michael Giacchino, who spins wonders out of this 4-note Batman theme at the beginning, the amount of permutations he puts through that, for all that brilliance, I think the script really did need a lot of work. There's also there's hard-boiled dialogue that is enjoyably on the nose. There's also on-the-nose dialogue that is just cringe-inducing in a way that, for example, the dialogue in The Dark Knight was never that cringe-inducing. Whenever Heath Ledger's Joker articulated his philosophy about him and Batman being effectively the same thing, it was never cringy. It was actually really disquieting and really disturbing for how truthful it was. You know, the fact that he was speaking some form of the truth. It's just that the Joker's truth was also the way he expressed that truth was anarchistic and violent and designed to bring Gotham City to its knees. I think this movie wants to evoke that, but doesn't quite have the writing sophistication of it. I think what this did was, this new Batman movie really made me appreciate the brilliance of what Christopher Nolan did with that Dark Knight trilogy, and the way that he reauthored the Batman world as a Heat Michael Mann style pragmatic world of glass-fronted buildings and relatively plausible incidents, and there was an ecosystem in which you had plausible mobsters and outsized heroes and supervillains all sitting alongside one another, all brought together really well. I have to say, I thought the Nolan series fell down quite badly with The Dark Knight Rises, but The Dark Knight is a masterpiece, and Batman Begins was an effective scene setter. This movie, I don't think fluidly brings that ecosystem together. There are lots of ragged, unconvincing, and implausible story angles. There's also a central conceit about the riddles that the Riddler leaves behind, which I thought were actually quite clangingly obvious, to the extent that it actually snapped me out of the narrative, because I was like, why is it taking such a long time for Batman and Gordon to figure this out? I don't want to big myself up. I felt several steps ahead there, which doesn't help with the propulsion of the storyline. There's also a surprisingly minimal role for Andy Serkis as Alfred, which is unusual, because I think also in retrospect that made me appreciate the brilliant warmth that Michael Caine brought to the role of Alfred in the Nolan trilogy, and the fact that Michael Caine plus Gary Oldman as Gordon and Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox brought a real humanizing, grounding element to that trilogy. And again, I don't quite think you've got that here, which, mixed with the length of the movie and the relentlessly gloomy, somber tone. I mean, there's nary a scrap of humor in it, and there was humor in the Nolan movies. There's very little humor here. It can make it a bit of a stretch, despite the really impressive technical aspects of the film. Robert Pattinson is, as expected, you know, a solid choice of Batman. I think this movie definitely favors the Batman side of the persona more than the Bruce Wayne side of the persona, which I think is a deliberate dramatic decision, because at the recent press conference for the movie, Pattinson described Bruce Wayne as an addict, someone who is addicted to the alter ego of the suit, to the extent that Bruce Wayne barely exists. And when you see him outside of the cowl, he is pale, he's sweaty, he's like a ghost. And that's obviously done deliberately. But I think any great Batman movie fashions just as much interest in Bruce Wayne as it does Batman. This falls down on the Bruce Wayne interest, which I think is a shame, because Pattinson is a fantastic actor and a very intense one in the right material. Hopefully the proposed Batman sequel from Matt Reeves, which is now being talked about, hopefully that can build on that element of it more successfully. I think Zoe Kravitz is fantastic as Selena Kyle. She brings a real slinky kind of feline physicality to that role. She is really, really good. Paul Dano is great, but the movie skirts around his narrative until far too late in the day. And I think when it does pick up with him, it gets more and more interesting. So I think overall, it's a mixed bag for me. I think I will always commend a movie like this that has got a singular vision, flawed as it may be. It does have a vision, and it really runs with that vision to incredibly dark and toiling degrees. I just wish there'd been more kind of humanity and more warmth and more humor in it. I think Matt Reeves is a really ambitious director. I love what he did with the two recent Planet of the Apes movies, and there is nothing in this Batman that strikes the emotional note of those two Planet of the Apes movies personally. I mean, he obviously did Cloverfield as well, which was a really great atmospheric found footage thriller. So I'm not denying that the Batman is going to be a huge hit, because it's a Batman movie. The brand name is enormous. There's a reason why people keep coming back to this character to reinvent it. I don't think this is a completely successful reinvention. I think it's somewhere in the middle. But if it sets the table for another Batman movie, and I don't want to give anything away, but it certainly does set the table for another one, then fingers crossed that next movie is going to be even better and even more commendably ambitious. So it's out, as I said, in the UK from Friday the 4th of March. So once you go and see it, please do let me know what you think of it, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.